After you've imported a roadmap visual to your Power BI, add it to the report. Increase its size to see basic instructions. They'll be visible until basic data are mapped. Let's now prepare that data. To show a basic roadmap, only 3 data fields need to be in a dataset: start date, end date, and axis Y. One record in the dataset represents one timely event with its start and its end. While start and end dates have a pretty clear meaning, the axis Y may be a little more difficult to explain. It typically represents a resource, for instance a person, role, machine, or a software, or it can represent an activity, for instance a project, product, or a campaign. The important thing is that within one axis Y, events should not overlap. One value of axis Y represents one row on the roadmap. Every entry in your dataset with the same axis Y will be shown in one row of the roadmap. In this example, axis Y represents various activities of a company. First 2 are marketing initiatives, next 2 represent some sales initiatives, and last 3 items are operational activities. It's important to notice that cost reduction has 2 separate phases, and so it'll be showed on a same row. Both date fields have date format. Axis Y is a text. This type of simple dataset can be imported into the Power BI. Once the data is in Power BI, fields can be mapped onto roadmap's visual fields. After fields are mapped, a basic roadmap is shown. From now on, it's also possible to enter a license key if you have one. Looking at the roadmap, we can see that each unique axis Y value is shown on the left axis, and each from to event is shown as a bar in a visual. So, even though there are 7 records in the dataset, only 6 unique Y-axis values have been extracted. But because there were 7 records, there are 7 bars with their start dates and end dates. 2 phases of the cost reduction are shown on the same line because they share the same Y-axis value. Beginning and end dates of the chart are automatically taken from the minimum and maximum event dates. We will cover the rest of the fields later. Let's now take a look at some basic formatting options. Let's start with left axis. The width can be changed to fit your data, and the font properties of axis labels can be modified. Labels of left axis are always aligned to the right. As we don't have the groups in the source data, coloring axis labels by groups is not yet available. If the switch is clicked, it goes back to the off position. Now, to change the time axis options, navigate to the time axis menu. Visual supports 2 time axes. One is called ticking, is the one that is closer to the axis, and the other, further from the axis, is called additional. Both axes have pretty much the same options, so I'll hide the additional axis for now. So, the time axis can be positioned at the top or at the bottom of the visual. The interval and the label that should be shown for the ticks is configurable. You may want to have, for instance, tick for every week or for every month, or maybe even once a quarter, depending on the time frame of your data. The label format should be also changed accordingly to this period. The position of the label can be changed. You can either label the boundaries or the inner intervals. Sometimes it may be useful to see the data within a specific time period, for instance a year. By default, the visual sets its beginning and end dates from the minimum and maximum dates in the source data. So, by default, this required whole year will not be shown. Now that's where the nice range becomes useful. With the nice range, the time axis gets rounded to the closest beginning and end date of the nice interval. So, if the nice range is turned on and the interval is a year, the closest beginning of the year and the closest end of the year will become the beginning and end for the time axis. This is pretty much all about the axis scaling and formatting options. Also, just as for the left axis, you can modify the font settings for the time axis. The very same set of options is available for additional time axis. The additional axis is useful to add some more context to the time axis. Like, when you're showing data within months of the year, the additional axis can add quarterly point of view into these yearly results. So, this is how it gets done. Turn the additional axis on, change its interval to quarters, and change the labels to quarters. Grid lines can be shown or hidden for the time axis. They're shown for both ticking and additional axis at the same time. Now that we've covered the basic fields, let's start extending them a little. With growing number of bars, it may be useful to show some basic or maybe a little more additional description to our visual. Simply to describe what events the bar represents. To describe the events, the source data can be extended by two fields: details and description. Detail is a short label of the event. Description is a longer explanatory text. So, for instance, see these process optimization bars. There are two events next to each other with no distinction of any sort. To see which means what, they should be labeled. Let's say that first is an invoicing process optimization and second represents optimization of the hiring process. Let's add them these descriptions. For the visual to work properly, all the details and descriptions have to be filled in. When the data is entered, Power BI must be refreshed and the fields can be mapped. Details to details and description to description. After the mapping, labels will be shown in the bars. There's one more thing which becomes relevant with the descriptions, as the tooltips. Whenever a mouse is pointed over a bar, a full record of data relevant to the bar is shown in the tooltip. So even when your description or details is too long to be shown in the bar, it's always shown in the tooltip. To see the tooltips, make sure the tooltip option is on. This brings us to the bar formatting options. A little more space between the bars can be added by increasing a relative spacing value. Color of the bars can be static or dynamic, given by the data, by the categories, groups or values. For this moment we have no data to color our bars by, only the static default option is possible. When the default color is modified, all the bars receive this color. Details and description texts can be altogether turned off or on by switching Show Texts. Additionally, descriptions can be hidden separately. That's useful when they become too long to be readable in the bar. When the descriptions are hidden, the details get a middle vertical alignment. Descriptions are still shown in the tooltip. Let's turn the descriptions back on. It can also be configured what should happen to the detail when it's longer than the bar. You can either have the texts wrapped, hidden, or left unchanged. Again, font formatting options are available for the texts, separate for the detail texts, and separate for the descriptions. Apart from the events or phases which last some time, it's sometimes useful to mark some significant moments on the roadmap. These moments are called milestones and have to be specially marked within the data. Such marked data will not be drawn as bars, but as points. To create a milestone, add a new line to your dataset. Fill the start and end date with the same date, enter axis Y to which the milestone belongs, typically it's an already existing one, give it a label and a description. The last but most important step is to distinguish that this data record represents a milestone. To do so, add a new field called Type and enter Milestone. Original, non-milestone records should be marked as phase. When the data is ready, let's refresh Power BI data and map the Type field. As a result, milestone appears and the bar's height will shrink a bit to make space for the milestones. You can see that milestones only shows text from the detail field. Description is again shown in the tooltip. In a similar way, we've prepared more milestones for the visual. To format the milestones, navigate to the Milestones option. Milestones can be turned off altogether, but let's leave them on. Just like, texts can be hidden. For the texts, date of the milestone can be shown either below or right of the milestone text. Date texts can be formatted to feature locale. Sometimes it may happen that milestone texts are so close to one another that they'd overlap. It's possible to choose whether all overlapping text should be shown or whether only the last milestone's text will be shown. As with the bars, milestones' colors can be set. The options are also the same. Either the color is static or dynamic, by the groups or categories. As we have not mapped neither of them, we're left with the static default color. Besides color, milestone's shape and its size can be set. With having milestones in the visual, there's an option to hide bars and have only milestones shown. Let's try it. When only milestones are shown, it may be difficult to see which left axis value they belong to. That's why there's a show guidelines when milestones only switch. When it's on, there are guidelines connecting y-axis with milestones. This is pretty much everything what's included in the basic free version of the visual. More formatting options come with the Pro version. Advanced features of this visual, such as grouping of left axis, dynamic color coding of bars and milestones, explicit sorting of the y-axis, are the Pro features. These special features can be tested for free, however, when used without a valid license, a watermark is shown in the background. If you'd like to try them out without the watermark, request your trial license. To get your trial license, click the button in the top left corner in the visual, navigate to our website, and request the license key. Once the key arrives in your mailbox, enter it in the very same window and the watermark disappears. When the trial version has expired, you can purchase a full version of the visual at our website. If you have any questions, visit our website or send us an email to visuals@adwise.cz.